Welcome to the Mutual Aid Report. The Mutual Aid Report delves into the concept of mutual aid and unpacks its historical significance and its role in local communities by spotlighting individuals who are making a real difference at the grassroots level in the city of Chicago. Let's elevate the profile of mutual aid, shed light on these community-based initiatives, and motivate others to either join or back existing ventures. Let's get right into it.
Welcome to the Mutual Aid Report. My name is Mario. Thanks for being here today. Really glad that you made this part of your Tuesday. We appreciate you and thank you so much for listening. Please tell folks about the Mutual Aid Report. Today is a very special edition for me in that I have on a really dear friend, longtime person of interest in my life that I haven't seen or talked to in a minute. It's Erika Allen. She is with the Urban Growers Collective. She is the Urban Growers Collective for all intents and purposes. She is an amazing person, and I think today will be a really good day to grab a pen and some paper and take some very powerful notes because we are going to talk about it today. Erika, how are you?
Thank you so much, Mario. You always shower me with the most beautiful compliments and encouragement. And I know you do this for so many of us that are out here trying to make the world a better place. And of course, improve ourselves and our communities and create these bridges that you are just truly the maestro, the conductor, and so many um,
Stop.
cultural connections and how you've used your talents and your ability to make everybody feel really important in the work they do and just in community. So I have to reflect back that compliment because you always do that to me and it humbles me to the ground. And
Oh,
I like the ground now. So
yeah, I know
but
that.
I have to return that
I
100.
I appreciate that. When I find that Mario fellow you were talking about, I'll be sure to let him know you said all those wonderful things about him. um, we've been talking a lot on this show about the importance of bridging that gap of food disparity in Chicago and trying to be more mindful about ways that we could be of service to people who need help in many different areas. This is a little bit different because this is more about being the source of food in Chicago.
Mhm.
Um, can you speak a bit about Chicago's past history where there was literally a farm in every yard in this city? And why did that stop?
I mean, when our people, new immigrants from all over the world came through Chicago, New York, and many other cities, I mean, the things that ground us are our foods, right? The ability to nourish our bodies, to celebrate, to reflect culture, and we all know that food is medicine, or we're I think kind of waking up to that. And when you talk about liberation or sovereignty, kind of decolonizing trade and economies, you have to look at the baseline human needs. And if a society, a community, a people are not in control of the food system or having a consciousness around the importance of that, other things begin to disintegrate. And so when you ask that question, and I love talking to elders who talk about like everybody had food, everybody had food growing anywhere because we were agrarian, right? We're our talents as a people, and I say that collectively to most people who immigrated here came from agrarian societies, all cultures, all nationalities, all complexions. And that's when new immigrants or folks who are, come into the U.S. I can just speak from much of my experience and that of my father's. That's the first thing that we do is ground ourselves in agriculture, especially the elders, and use it as a springboard for getting I'm going to say assimilated because that's really what it is, but to be able to now have this consciousness of embracing the cultural foods and dynamics of a people coming in. So why was it lost? I mean, why is everything lost?
Right.
I mean, that's the question. I mean, because land became valuable, because people were hustling to survive, because of redlining, because of racism, because of, you know, the 70s and 80s, because of all kinds of dynamics that when folks are trying to, and I just imagine this, um, are trying to break through barriers, you leave things behind. And we as a people have a lot of loss and a lot of um, unacknowledged, or it's beginning to be acknowledged, of being forced off land, trail trail of tears. A lot of us have that ancestry. um, Terrorism, inability to actually enter into, I can grow a ton of food, but I can't sell it,
Mm.
or I'm farming cotton, I take it in and I get a lower price than everybody else, or the I'm in debt at the end of the season. Oh, you owe us this amount, and all the systems in place are going to back up that system. I That's painful. And
Mm.
so, as my work has been um, about healing that, and also addressing the root causes of why um, we have food inequity, that we need food justice, why we need access to permanent places to grow food, and that it's not about creating, another tier of wealth creation in a way that is creates even more inequity, but around healing from that part of ourselves that couldn't be healed because we were just trying to survive. We're at this inflection point where we're looking at it holistically, and I say we. I'm a oh, by the way, she, her, hers, and I do a we us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about that mutualism with nature, and what that means for moving our whole society forward. Um, and food is just a basic. If you don't have, not just redistributing food or making sure folks who we perceive as being hungry, and there are many people who are, especially children, and folks who are unhoused and don't have, or folks who are housed who may not be able to pay the gas bill. So that's a whole thing. There's so many different um, reflections of these historic, unmet, unaddressed, unrepaired um, reasons why the work that I've been privileged to lead, and that I had the privilege of growing up having an understanding of how important this is within the context of larger, more kind of, you know, uh, becoming a doctor, a lawyer, et cetera,
Yeah.
right? Like that's something that, uh, that's not something we were encouraged for a couple of generations to kind of go back into agriculture for these reasons.
Is there a reason that the city of Chicago, and I can only speak to the city of Chicago because this is where I'm at, has a very unique way of saying to people who are trying to thrive in urban agriculture, you're good doing it, but everybody can't do it. For example, if I have a house in my backyard and I'm growing collards, I'm just growing collard greens in my backyard. I can't resell or distribute that to anybody. I'm unable to, in effect, profit off of the dirt and help people eat at the same time. Why isn't urban agriculture more widespread in a city like Chicago, Illinois?
But I think it is now. You can do that now.
Hmm.
So there has been policies that have been worked on by the Food Equity Council, the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, um, advocates for urban agriculture. There's been quite a bit of, in the last two administrations, shifts around removing those barriers. There's now a business license for urban ag. We never had that before. We didn't have zoning for urban ag. Yeah, that is, and we now have a community growing um, program. And I say we again. I'm this we us sir, um, where I think there's 13 new growers who received resources to not only startup farms, but also to activate selling on those spaces. So there, a lot of those barriers have been removed. And if there are issues, and that this continues to be a challenge, and I do think that there needs to be some mobilization, is that not everybody just eats vegetables. There's been some challenges around people keeping chickens and limiting that or omitting that when, having a few chickens in the backyard, you got eggs, you got protein, you got your collard greens, you can feed yourself and share with your neighbors. But activating not only the information, the kind of know-how, making sure that we're not encouraging people to grow collard greens in a backyard that is full of lead. And I've always worked from a perspective that all the land that we're working in is contaminated, so I can't use that land to work indirectly. So I grow above it. I grow above it, and I constantly replenish where I'm growing with new fertility, new compost, and that compost is delicious. And it's kind of gross to think of compost and soil as delicious, but you want it to be delicious because that's what you're eating. You're eating what's in the soil.
Right.
So if you're eating, even if somebody goes and gets a test done and, oh, there's no lead here, whatever's there, there's not nutrient there. And so we understand that, and we want to make sure people have that information. And at this point, people can find all kinds of ways to mitigate what may be happening in their backyard. Okay, not everyone has a backyard. Not everybody is going to go out and wants to grow collard greens. So I want to connect you with people like me. I'm kind of an OG in this at this point, but there's so many people who are doing this now and are passionate about it. To know that a block away, a nice little walk away, there's somebody who's growing food for you in your community and wants to do that. And hey, you can go by here every week and pick up your greens.
Yeah.
You're in Englewood, you can go to Sisters in the Village, growing a home. They're certified organic. You can come on site. UGC. We're in South Chicago, and we're mobile. And so these are all, we're still in early stage reclamation. So these are examples of what can inspire and build and mobilize folks to really think about food sovereignty. So I know this is a mutual aid report, which I love because it is a big umbrella.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this work and food systems and community food systems, is that it's not a one unidirectional way of applying it. Some people think mutual aid is just like a food not bombs perspective. It's not just one perspective. And I love what those organizations do. It's not what I do. It's complementary because we have to have many, many different avenues to get to everybody. And all of these, we learn things from each other. We cross fertilize, right? We cross pollinize. All of the different ways that people are inspired and passionate about taking care of each other. And there's varying degrees of skill sets and disciplines that are needed to be able to be productive and to be responsible in food production. So that's a little heady, maybe a little that's the stuff I think about. And I also think that within our city, there are enough resources. A lot of the open space that people may see, like, look at all this open, like, why are we growing food? Which in my early years, I would just look at these spaces and that without really just from being trained as a visual artist, wouldn't really think about the history and why, right? That took me a little bit longer to look at, space on the west side or the south side, and these whole big blank areas. And not immediately thinking about why that was like that. I just thought, why are we growing food all over? This is something that we need to do. And not recognizing and understanding that people used to live here. Right? Whole neighborhoods have, never got rebuilt or revitalized after the uprisings post assassinations of the 60s. And still is just starting to be activated. So there's so much with this, and urban ag really creates that activation that I'm seeing a space. I'm asking questions. why can't I grow food? If you're going to stop me from growing food in an empty lot that no one's using because of X, Y, and Z,
Mm.
and it's contaminant and all these excuses, but people are living here, children are walking across this space, and yet I can't activate this. So those are the questions,
Yeah.
right? And more and more people are asking those questions and making um, making a place, making space, which I feel like I'm proud of the work I've done. I would do it very differently now that there's a thing that exists.
Mm-hmm.
You can always go back and like, oh yeah, now, but that is the legacy, right? That's the continuity. Um, that it shouldn't be a this or that. It's both. Like once somebody activates a growing space, it's not just people getting collard greens or green tomatoes or celery or whatever it is that somebody wants to grow. Is a living, vibrant, fifth dimensional space that there's a whole ecosystem that activates. And it's birds, it's microbes, it's insects, it's people, and for a long time, the mutual aid work that I led and created disruptions in the way that I do, which is not as radical as some folks, but by asking questions is the why. Why can't we do this here? Why can't, and Chicago, for as many challenges as we have, if no one has a good reason to say why you can't, you kind of can for a little bit
Mm-hmm.
until it starts to disrupt maybe development, right? And I had to fight for a long time to advocate that urban agriculture in any place where people grow food and create an environmental oasis should be permanent, that it's in perpetuity. It is not a temporary use because people are not temporary use and nature is not temporary use.
I
I'm a talker,
No,
Mario, so
man,
sorry if
you
I'm just
stop it. Come on now.
pontificating too much.
It is all good. It's perfect. Stop. Don't, no, no, no. This is why you're here. Um, what are I know you mentioned South Chicago. Shout out to everybody in South Chicago. That's one of my many old neighborhoods, no doubt. And having grown up in South Shore and South Chicago and ran those streets for many a day, it is a very unique side of town to be based out of with this work. Talk to me about the origin of the Urban Growers Collective, and although I know it, um, also just the strength of what you're doing in South Chicago. How has that side of town responded to the work? So origin story, and then response from the people who live in South Chicago.
Origin story. So Urban Growers Collective used to be Growing Power Chicago. And Growing Power Chicago, I founded the office in 2002, but really started the work in 2001. I originally started the work to do art therapy, art psychotherapy, as to create an open studio intervention program. My thesis was around crossroads, alternative alternative interventions for at-risk youth in lieu of incarceration. That was where I started. I wanted to work with the justice system, and I say that in quotes, um, uh, to uh, to address trauma and provide pathways for healing for young people who had entered into that system, and to just to create a different way to work with our young people than just locking them up and thinking that that's going to somehow shift dynamics. So that's
Right.
how I started. That was my thesis, and that was what I was going to work on. And then 9/11 happened, and I was running a food pantry. It was a family resource and support position. Food pantry, FEMA services, so CETA, like getting your lights on, helping rent assistance, clothing depository. And I had this linear model of moving from emergency to enrichment. And knowing that I can't do the art therapy work, the healing work, things I talked about earlier around our historic shared trauma around terrorism and enslavement, and really very much saw the opportunity to pivot from that event, realizing how food insecure we all are and were, and I hope that shifts within my lifetime. Um, that I didn't feel responsible pursuing the art as the focus when I knew how to grow food. I grew up on a farm, so I no off farm labor. So my dad had us working like from the get go. So I grew up with that ethic. I didn't like it, but I learned how to do everything. So I was at farmers markets, Fondy Market, when it was thousands of people would go to that market, and I was selling the most beautiful greens because that's what we brought to the community. So I had that coming in, and then it was like, epiphany, like I want to do X, Y, Z. I want to make art and do these community murals and do all these things, but I know that my people need food. And it's really serious when I'm the only one in my peer group who, with the exception of like Vera Vidanovic, who does the Hyde Park Makers Market, who also grew up on a farm.
My buddy Vera.
Your buddy.
That's
yeah.
right.
The only other person who, like, who knows how to do this? If something goes down, like, who can do this? And, the elders hold that. There's elders. I just remember seeing elders with the collard greens in the front yard sitting on the thumbs like, yes, but elders are elders.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have a lineage and a way to pass these traditions down through what we've moved into with UGC, an apprentice model, where you're learning what we learn, what we've known, what we're learning, what we're doing this together. But I'm a little farther ahead because I've been doing it longer, and I have a responsibility to make sure you have that link in the chain. So that really kind of like was the continuum. And then when Growing Power in Milwaukee closed, my father's operation closed and really fulfilled its mission, and it wasn't financially viable anymore. We had trained thousands of people, not only just trained, but empowered folks to see reality in a different way and to begin thinking about how do we create both emergency and enrichment, right? So when the pandemic hit, I already had like 20 different ways to respond to an emergency because that was my frame. It was from the beginning. How do you come into a city, or you're part of a city, and we're just dependent on externalities, and expect, if something goes down, how are we going to care for ourselves? And that disturbed me. And I also just, as a trained clinician, I could do therapy with you, but if you're worried about paying your rent, or you're in a domestic violence situation, or you have a chronic illness, or there's so many things that accompany living in poverty, or whatever to frame, whatever the language we want to use. So I'm gonna do therapy with you. Yeah, the therapy is stable housing, nutritionally dense food, and a means to participate in work that's meaningful, that is restorative, that I can see that restores and complements my humanity, and reestablishes accountability to each other, and having that discipline. It's for me, and there's so many beautiful projects. I know what my lane is. My lane is not your lane, right? But my lane, can run along your lane.
Right.
But my lane doesn't have to be your lane. I don't need your lane to be my lane. And that understanding is still challenging for folks. And it's something that that I know that when a lane is created, I don't know why I'm saying using a lane, but I am, that analogy or that visual, that once it's there, then folks can critique it. They can rip it apart. They can, why aren't they doing that? All that is good, because that means that then that motivates folks to do their own thing, to go through the trials and tribulations of building a food system, of even if it's tiny, even if it's a pot that sits on a stoop and I'm growing a few plants, caring for something outside of ourselves, and having that nurture us reestablishes and affirms our humanity. And then I can trade with you. Some people like to do that. Most people want to sell because we need cash to live.
Yeah.
So how can we do all those things? And that's what kind of brought me into the work. That's what made me pivot. But it's really, how do you create economies that are non-extractive and that take a lot of work to do? And I think that's what's kept me in this work. That's what's evolved the work. And the inflection right now is really post-pandemic. I think people got a break. A lot of issues were revealed. Um, As the hardest I've in the most frustrating time period and there's been a lot that I've encountered. It's really a difficult cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was just mitigating the disappointment we could not do more. That if only we had more of these systems in place, um, that's the sort of like, more pessimistic perspective. On the flip of it, mutual aid and real, meaning like neighbors taking care of neighbors, organizing, redistributing, all kinds of beautiful work. I think of the work of Cosmos Ray, one of my favorite, just humans, but just
Absolutely.
seeing how somebody outside of that discipline like activated. And we worked together a little bit over the pandemic, and just redistributing and sharing food and resources that we redeployed for UGC. Now we're kind of moving back into not business as usual, but we have to create these economies that can be sustainable. And that's difficult. It's difficult. It's the reality of it, but also knowing that there'll be more pressures, there'll be more things that come up, and we have to be ready to pivot between distribution and survival, and then enrichment and creating economies and being able to uh, reclaim and situate our community's food system.
We're going to take a break, Erica. When we get back on the other side, I want to talk about some of the things in the mission statement of Urban Growers Collective. And I do still want to hear about how the South Chicago community has responded, because I'm very fond of that neighborhood. And you mentioned two people I really dig, Vera and Kaz. So that's pretty cool. I like that. All right. We're moving along wonderfully. We'll be back with more with Erika Allen in just a moment. This is the Mutual Aid Report. And we're back. The magic of radio, Erika Allen. Talk to me about South Chicago and how they've responded to the work that UGC does.
So I love South Chicago. Like, I love South Chicago in a way that I did not know.
Mm-hmm.
How rich the community is, and important the history of South Chicago is to Chicago. I know I said Chicago a whole lot of times, but to me it's Chicago because it's an international community that I
Mm-hmm.
don't think people know. There's people from all over the world, a lot of folks from the Caribbean as well. It is truly a BIPOC, a Black, Indigenous, people of color community, of all kinds of cultures. Um, we have been embraced by the South Chicago community. The work, because it started off and always will be youth centered. Being able to now have a we've been active in South Chicago for about 7, 8 years. We farm in Clara Schaefer Park. Farming in the commons is farming for Chicago. It's important. It's from the Grant Park Farm, the Art in the Farm, which was established in 2005 as a policy shifting recirculation of landscaping resources to grow food, and to employ and create a pathway for our youth to be downtown and have agency, and to shift the way that cities think about public spaces for food sovereignty and food production. That was the sort of, and for it to be beautiful and like to remind people, food grows out of the ground for young people within this frame of, reclaiming our talents and our ability to take care of our communities through agriculture. The goal of that project was to showcase, but also I understood that this should be in every community. We should have this in every community. This should not just be these beautiful landscapes downtown, but everywhere. And so that was the starting point. And so South Chicago Farm really developed out of a planning process that that was healthy. It was a public health intervention actually around food and fitness. And at that time it was Park 503. So I think during the Daley administration, I'm not sure what era of
Mm-hmm.
like what term, but that site had been, kind of reclaimed as a park, but it hadn't been named. And through the kind of activation of the work, the specific public health um, conversations, and a table that was set to begin looking at that, and there was a bunch of different entities, including the Chicago Park District, at the table. Um, this site came up, and it had been a steel workers neighborhood. Um, the part of the park that there's the fitness park has a walking path and just big green open space. The farm part of the park is the food part, and the idea of that space is very much to have food and fitness occupying a public space to serve as a resource, but also to create a model where, because there's a farm and it's active and it has all these different ways that the South Chicago community is benefiting, but also it's safe, right? It doesn't require additional policing. It doesn't require additional security because we're there. So moms and dads with their babies and elders do walking, like there's always people in that space, and it's safe for people because we're there. And so just the proximity of the activity, and then as we've gained more capacity, we have 60, 70 families that farm in allotments in the community garden.
Wow.
Many, I'd say 80% come from South Chicago or South Shore, South Side, and it's multicultural, predominantly BIPOC folks, but it's a multicultural, community. Youth walk from the neighborhood and have summer and after school employment opportunities and a safe space to learn about who they are and each other. We have apprentices that participate. We have volunteers in our programs. Now we have a farm stand, soon to be a farmers market, as we build our capacity to welcome and support many other folks to come to that park in South Chicago and be in community. That takes years to develop that, and now that we have more capacity, we're adding more pathways. So recently, so embraced. Um, Politically, things have changed in the ward. We've always been supported, and we continue to be. I'm not real political. I know I sound like I am most of the time, but I'm really not. I'm a problem solver and an implementer. I'm not really an organizer. I just organize around what I'm implementing, and look at. I can't imagine why any council person in this city or anyone who is a public servant wouldn't be supportive of anyone's efforts to support and care for their community, especially when it doesn't cost them anything. So whenever I see resistance to this kind of work, especially in the Commons, when there is a community need, when the work came out of a community organizing apparatus, people may not know this, but it always does, unless it's like Grant Park, which is a whole other kind of thing. But
Right.
that's a different conversation. And that space is very much embraced with the people who live downtown. They don't necessarily know all the extra things because people experience that, but just that dichotomy of these spaces, and they look real similar. They shouldn't look different, right? They should be beautiful and just abundant, and also safe. Safe in the ways that our community has prescribed to us what safety means. When I walk through those gates, I know that I'm safe. You can feel
Yeah.
it, and nature feels it. We got all kinds of interesting situations that happen because we reestablished an ecosystem. Now, South Chicago, our friends at SEDEF, Southeast Task Force, and others who do environmental justice work, are our friends, and we want to make sure that we're showing our role is to really show what can be possible. What happens after we get polluting entities out of our communities and transition and transform those practices into things that are beneficial to everybody. And that's what we're beginning to do with our Green Era project. Like we don't have to be utilizing all these caustic fuels when we can recirculate with renewable energy and create new economies, new pathways to have all kinds of things that aren't extractive or exploitive.
And that brings me to ask, with the technology that is available to you now that was not available 20 years ago, there are a lot of things that you could be doing in those areas that when we talked earlier that aren't nutrient rich, where the soil is not nutrient rich, but the ability to be able to grow above it, things like that. How has technology aided the work that you do in terms of growing in an urban area like Chicago?
I love the conversation in technology, right? So the first technology that I learned around this kind of circular growing methodology, using fancy words all in a sense, um, was vermicomposting, right? And so that actually is a Egyptian, that was like a special, you know, not like farming along the Nile is all the secrets were about the worms and being able to work with nature to make materials available and materials. When I say materials, I mean like micronutrients available to plants. Worms do that. So that's the work my dad did, and really did a lot of deep work around reclaiming that technology and amplifying it, because urban ag is really about the technology of it at the most basic level, meaning like what I can do with very little resources, and it's always important. That is technology, is understanding how to do that. And once I understand that at a baseline, I can start adding more and more like engineering and efficiencies, and vertical farming, and all kinds of amazing things that automate production. I still want to make sure that the root of that is in these earth systems, and that I'm not getting too far away from what organisms do for us, because we're a reflection of those organisms. So I'm eating food that is not really growing in soil, that after a while it's going to have this is my thesis, right? Really theory, I should say, that's going to have an impact on our gut biome. We need to have that connection. So how do I prepare and use technology to do both of those things? So so for me, it's two sides of the coin, right? It's high tech, low tech, and I don't value high tech more than low tech. High tech is hard because it's expensive. It's actually kind of easy, and it's just following the rules and knowing, like, keeping controlled environment, and kind of doing more of a monoculture approach, where low tech allows you to really work in harmony with nature, but you're going to have less control over things that may happen. And for humans, we need to do both. And if you're doing dynamic systems and you're training people, and I know there's probably more comfortable words that people need. I like training because that means I'm learning, but whatever words that don't trigger people. But when I'm training or passing along the knowledge, it takes a minute for folks to understand that at a deep level and appreciate it, because when you skip those steps, when you get into technology, you don't have the capacity or the experience in problem solving. And a lot of this is problem solving work. So I don't know if I answered your question.
You did.
But those are the things. That's how I connect the two.
Yeah.
And the tech that we're moving into is possible, like the more kind of like when you think of green technology or, automated controlled environment growing, to me, it's like hoop houses we can build ourselves with plastic and, that with Home Depot supplies, to, vertical climate control automated systems that, use all kinds of energy efficiencies that can recirculate CO2 from the digestion process, that nutrient flows can come from food waste that's being anaerobically digested, where we're creating, or capturing methane from the decomposition process. Like all that we're doing on the farm in a low tech way, and it's not as profitable, but it is probably more important to do the low tech in terms of community sovereignty, building, and education.
Not that you need to, but Elevator pitch me on being a volunteer with UGC.
What? How to? Or
Yes.
what to?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
So, so yeah, starting once the weather warms up. Right now, it's our new apprentices, our returning apprentices, our youth programs. All of our programs are starting. So we really start opening up for volunteer opportunities, which are is a great way, especially recurring volunteers, and we have some amazing recurring volunteers who contribute to the collective approach. Um, I also want to talk about what a collective is because I think there's some confusion. It's a similar conversation. You could have a collective report because I think that's one of those words that people think one thing, like mutual aid, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people.
Hmm.
Our collective approach is in tiers, right? Like you can engage in your own world with your 10 by 10 plot, or you can, you might be a staff person who's an integral part of creating the space and operating programs, or something in between, and as a volunteer and coming and contributing, volunteers who come back over and over again are learning alongside everybody else. um, but coming out for a day and helping to pull weeds or helping to lay wood chip or helping to harvest, or folks have skills or things that they want to share, all are welcome. And when you go to our website, there's you can sign up, and when volunteer slots open up, folks can will be invited to participate. And yeah.
I think that's dope. I think that's it. That's the way that this works, and the reason why, particularly us talking about mutual aid on Lumpin' Radio, it's because it's not just one thing, and in this instance, it's the
Mm-hmm.
source of the whole thing is food, and the idea that there are places here in Chicago that are growing produce and are growing food for folks. You know what, real quick, you mentioned chickens earlier in our conversation, and I immediately thought about Chicago Avenue in the middle of the night coming from a party in Wicker Park and being on Chicago Avenue and seeing huge trucks with hundreds and hundreds of chickens on them. And I was not aware how big of a deal chickens are in Chicago to that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows you that even though we're a big city, a thriving big city, we are very much in the middle of farm USA. Like all around us is it's happening. And I think sometimes a potent reminder for us is knowing that organizations like UGC are around, because that brings us back to center. Like, this is where you are. It's almost like when you look at the Earth from outer space and realize that it is very, very small, and we're on a very, very small rock in the middle of all kinds of happenings. It gives you that sense of, okay, it's the purposefulness of having organizations that do things like this, and they're here. And I do think sometimes we get lost in the miasma of a big city like Chicago, where we don't get a chance to go, oh, this is really happening around me. I need to try to get my hands dirty every now and then to keep this going.
Yeah.
It's that thing that makes us who we are as a people. Um, we've got a little bit of time left. I want to talk about the Chicago Food Policy Action Council and the work that they're doing and how you are involved in that.
I so I am an emeritus board member. So I co-founded SIFPAC, as it's now called, the acronym, the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, back in 2002. So
Mm-hmm.
when I first started the work of the office, and I chose to open the Growing Power Chicago office instead of a new organization because I wanted to be a project office. I didn't wanted to really translate the work that was happening that my dad was leading. I wanted to see it in Chicago, and wanted and I needed to relearn and like catch up because I had like kind of, you know, when trying to do this farm work, I had a calling for it. Um, what I found, and back to your question too about like the policy barriers and working with the city and
Mm-hmm.
moving the city along a continuum, I realized I needed to get involved in policy because it was really difficult to just have conversations because there wasn't urban agriculture wasn't legally allowed. There wasn't any zoning. There was no even just learning about zoning. I just looked at some space like you get all this. I mean, I'm kind of obnoxious like that. Like what you got all this Grant Park that's just like you know just empty grass. Like why can't we grow some food here? I mean, I really like I just see it like, and I have a frame because I grew up doing the work without like and even just my understanding of farming is very different than we some people own land and then farm workers come through and all of that like we did the work.
Yeah.
So I just saw it and I'm like, oh, this isn't 120 acres. This is like for me was like, oh yeah, this would be fun. This is gardening, but
Mm.
it's not. It's intense urban ag. So I think that like the the impetus to do this work, the impetus to shift policy, and understanding that just to even change those realities took so much work and so many people, amazing people who have food businesses that are doing other work who, I mean, all coalesced around this, but all for different reasons. And it took many years, but then in the last, I'd say 7, 8 years, SIFPAC is really, focused on the good food purchasing policy. I said that weird, good food purchasing policy, which is just a way. It was one of the planks that SIFPAC identified. I mean, literally, the people who were doing the work at the time, looking into the city's procurement budget, like how much money does Chicago spend on food, and can that be opened up to support community growing? At that time, it was like $16 million. I think it's quite a bit more now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would it look like if the city took its buying power and set aside a certain portion just for purchasing from BIPOC growers, from community growers, from local growers? And there are multiple entities that kind of activated around that. I know the summit's coming up in the next couple of weeks. I think it's like the 18th, 19th summit. I get to just go and not have to speak or do anything else. I'm
Nice.
like the OG, yeah, and I get to just enjoy and hear and see this next generations taking on the work and such diversity and approaches. So so that's the work. The policy and the apparatus that SIFPAC holds, along with other organizations that are specialized, you know, uh, is critical. And for implementers like me, having an entity that leads that policy work and also supports, um, like the education and bringing, the folks that make our political decisions, making them aware of the opportunities with the resources that they have to deploy, and opening up opportunities for that um, the city's food equity council, which I have been privileged to be a co-chair of, along with many other leaders, including SIFPAC, Roger Cooley, who's was co-founder as well of SIFPAC and continues to lead as the executive director SIFPAC, and so many other folks, including our friends at the Community Food Navigator, which I'm an advisor on. And I would love to, at a future time, talk about that project, because that's really our co-created, it's one of the most comprehensive co-created community-led projects that I've ever participated in, to create a space where people can navigate and share, whether it's a mutual aid, hub, or an urban farm that I want to volunteer in, or I want to buy like food. I want to buy those collard greens that Mario is growing. How do I find Mario?
I don't know
Like
if you
having
want
that
to. I don't
place.
know if you want those collard greens.
I'm just saying, if you decided to grow your collard greens
Yes.
and you wanted people in your neighborhood to find you, how do you let people know? And how
Right.
do they even, like, we don't have that. And so there are so many great projects that are SIFPAC, Chicago Food Policy Action Council, Advocates for Urban Agriculture, the Food Equity Council, which is really going to be, which formed 2 years ago, I think we formed, to have that embedded in the mayor's office with representatives from every agency that deals with food in our city, and about to open up to be folks from all over the place, to have a nexus where we can make sure people's needs are met. So when grocery stores close, or we use our tax money to create incentives for corporations to come in and build infrastructure, and then they leave when their time is up, and then we don't have basic food access, because we also don't prescribe what that means.
Mm-hmm.
We want people need to have choices and opportunities. So how do we do that in really constructive and consistent and inclusive ways? So I love the work that SIPVAC continues to lead. And it's not just Chicago, it's statewide and it's federal. And there's so many intersections with leaders like Anton Seals, who I know is a dear friend and has been on the show. And I'm fortunate to be on his board. And he is part of Green Era and part of our board. We have intersectionality. We're doing this, and we're doing it in ways that aren't always seen or understood, not because there's any kind of like hiding things, because we out here doing the work. And so having these opportunities to share through your platform, and to really just build that kind of like community of care. I'm learning a lot about more West Coast types of approaches that we're just beginning to kind of enter into, where there's a place for everybody's approach, and we need to really empower our elected officials and our public servants who we pay through our taxes to serve our best and highest need. But we got to have we can do a lot of different things. People do a lot of different things. I like to kind of have this is the thing that can solve your complex problem, and it's good, and there's support,
right.
And yes, and not be gaslighted in that, and because it's not easy, and it's always helpful to understand why the policies are put in place, and then to dismantle the ones that have been in place as a kind of holdover from racist policies of the past. And that is where we're at. And so I know I went I did a whole lot of extra lip around SIPVAC, but that's how I look at policy.
You don't have to apologize for anything. You're fine. You're fine. We got about 2 minutes left. The weather has not been horrible in Chicago for the winter of 2023-24. And although it is Chicago, that means that winter probably has more to come for us. What is your outlook for the farm and farming in general in terms of what kind of yield we might be able to expect this spring and summer?
It's real warm. It's, we grow primarily, along the lake, in various spots, and then some microclimates. It's going to be inconsistent. It's going to be, until we're into like June, we're going to have these 60-degree days, and then it's going to be freezing cold. It's supposed to snow tonight.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And it's February. I expect this kind of like weather behavior in April, maybe March, late March. But it's Chicago, we are prepared for the unpredictable. People just need to just be mindful. Don't believe the weather. Watch the Farmer's Almanac and the last frost-free date, and then extra provisions, meaning like don't just think, oh, now it's warm today, let me plant these tomatoes. No, don't put them out unless you have a controlled environment, because they will struggle. They might not die, but they'll turn purple. They'll do all kinds of things because they can't handle the cold air. So people just have to, keep an eye out. You're always safe with, spinach and early crops, because they can handle a frost and the snow. Carrots after, I don't put anything out really until after the spring equinox, because of the light, because you need the photosynthesis.
Right.
And so there's I've noticed a lot more sun. So we're starting to see things pop, like the bulbs of the daffodils are starting to show their tips. And it's because of the light. And so just observations. Usually it's really cloudy in February. It's been like beautiful
Yeah.
at least the last few days.
Yeah.
So unpredictable. Plan for what you don't think. Um, Check the weather, look at trends, and cover things up if you get itchy green fingers before putting everything out.
We've had the pleasure of talking with Erika Allen from Urban Growers Collective. If you want more information about Urban Growers Collective, please visit them on the internet at urbangrowerscollective.org. I'm so proud of you. I love you very much. I'm glad we had a chance to chat. It's been way too long. I hope I see you soon, and thank you so much for being on the Mutual Aid Report.
Thank you. Thanks for the love, and I return the love, and this has been a great honor. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Erika Allen from the Mutual Aid Report. We'll see you next time. This is WLPNLP Chicago, 105.5 FM, Bumpin' Radio.